From the New York Post, adding onto the story we saw earlier about the Teamsters refusing to endorse the Democrat, the New York Post reports Michigan union members blame Biden electric vehicle mandates for auto industry layoffs. Quote, want to slit our throats. The auto industry is big business in Michigan, and a major round of layoffs is revving the election into high gear for industry workers in this critical swing state who blame the Biden-Harris administration's heavy-handed electric vehicle mandates for the painful job losses. Stellantis, which manufactures Chrysler, Jeep, and Dodge vehicles, announced last month it will lay off 2,450 workers at its Warren plant. While industry jobs in the state have been declining since 1990, Michigan auto workers explained to the Post why Team Biden's green energy rules are at fault this time. United Auto Workers member Isaiah Gordon, 24, works on hybrid batteries at Ford's Rawsonville plant and said the forced transition to electric vehicles is damaging the industry. I'm sure all the people I work with are glad to have jobs. The problem is these electric vehicle departments, you're laying people off. Fellow UAW member Chris Vitale, a technician mechanic for Chrysler, agreed, saying electric cars require considerably less labor to produce than gas-powered vehicles. This is Michigan, key swing state. And union members in Michigan are blaming Biden-Harris for losing jobs. Michigan's already been in a rough state since 1990, as it stated. We all know about the auto industry collapse. I don't know how. You look at the Teamsters, you look at Michigan UAW, and you conclude that Kamala Harris is going to win these places. That being said, shadow campaign, I understand. But in terms of winning the argument, it becomes extremely difficult to believe that in a real world scenario where everybody goes in and casts their ballots, Kamala Harris can win.
I fully agree with that. But I'm just living in terror of the electronic voting machines flipping vote tallies. I just don't know how to combat that tactic.
Or ballot harvesting.
It's interesting, too. Just a few weeks ago, the UK announced that they were assembling a council to combat misinformation about electric vehicles in order to try to boost sales. So I'm sure we'll probably see one of those rolled out here, too. But, I wish we could have discussions, right, in terms of polling and thinking that it translates quite nicely and squares out, the numbers when it comes to voting. But, the point that Democrats are in such opposition to the SAVE Act, which would, not a very radical proposition, which is that non-citizens shouldn't be allowed to vote. I mean, if that's a non-starter, I think that kind of shows you in really the dangerous territory that we're in. But you already see it in the news cycle, right? The calculated campaigns. I think that USPS letter saying that there's going to be delays. Like I said, I mean, they're buying freaking panic buttons for
the New York Times saying that the election will not be. The New York
delays.
Times, right? Sorry, saying we will not know the results on election night.
They're buying panic buttons for election workers down in Georgia and Cobb County because they're saying MAGA, people like this show, we're radicalizing people to make them. My point being, they're even panic buttons. The ridiculousness of the story aside, they're curating a narrative, right? That there's going to be chaos on election day. And frankly, I think the most concerning part, I'm sure you guys are aware, I think you guys covered it, but the idea of the Transition Integrity Project, right? That was part of sort of that Time magazine story back in 2020. But they're back, and they're back with a vengeance. You could argue they never went away, but they sort of have gone a step further than their 2020 plans. And they are talking on record about how they've been reaching out to state and local officials saying that we're trying to get prearranged, predetermined commitments from Republicans and Democrats to sort of, defend democracy and do all these nebulous terms. Who knows what the heck it means? But they're really coming in guns blazing, and you can tell with the level to which they're projecting, right, that it's Republicans who are getting ready to rig and steal the election. They melt down when Trump says the same exact things that they do, but there's, tenfold, 100-fold more evidence on that side of the football than there is on the Democratic side.
How many times do we have to hear Stacey Abrams or Hillary Clinton say the election was taken? And like Elizabeth Warren years ago had a whole letter out there about not trusting, I think it was Dominion machines or whichever machine.
The Democrats were going nuts on voting machines. I think it was 2012 at the Black Hat convention, or DEF CON and Black Hat. They hacked voting machines. I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Ian, you might know this. That DEF CON, it's a hacker convention. Every year has the election hacking village, meaning like in August you go to Las Vegas. You go to the largest hacker convention in the world. There's two of them, DEF CON and Black Hat. One's corporate, one's kind of just wild. And you go out there and say, where can I learn about hacking voting machines? And they're like, oh, we got a couple hundred people over here doing it right now.
Step right this way.
I'm pretty sure they have the voting hacking village. So they have like lock picking, they have industrial control systems. Dude, it's a wild place. I really do recommend, if you ever have the time to check out Def Kind of Black, you should definitely check it out.
Well, in 2018, it was Pelosi. She commissioned a whole entire report on foreign election interference. And Bob Mueller just today wrote a foreword for a new book, and they're pumping it out in The Guardian, and he's saying that Russia's going to interfere in the 2024 election. But I think the worst thing in all of this is that they keep rolling out. There's a new campaign they just launched with a bunch of former governors. They're, of course, now making all these members of Congress sign what they're calling a unity pledge to say that, no matter what, on January 6th, we're going to sign the election results and we're going to go to the inauguration. They haven't done anything substantive to make elections more secure, right? And it's this sort of interesting psyop where it's like, instead of actually trying to convince you and do the actual groundwork and legwork to secure elections, we're just going to wheel out a bunch of like old politicians and say, you have to trust elections, otherwise you're deranged and crazy, right? And it's a very weird approach. It's the same thing with some, right? If you actually wanted, and that's frankly the issue that I take with this whole Postal Service letter, right, about the mail-in ballots. If you actually took issue with that letter, the answer would be, let's holistically review mail-in ballots. We shouldn't use them. They're rife with fraud. Every country hasn't used them. And when they have, they get rid of it because it doesn't work. But instead, the answer is, no, we're going to double down on needing to use mail-in ballots, even though we're writing you a letter right now about saying how we can't count them.
It's so insecure. People my whole life said, don't mail cash. Don't put cash in the mail and send it because someone will just open up the thing and take it, or who knows what's going to. Don't mail your cash.
Right.
But people are comfortable mailing their ballot.
It's very important vote. For the most important vote.
One of the most secure things you do politically in your life is
there's
ensure your
today,
ballot.
Right, in Arizona, that there was sort of, again, mistakes that always seem to go one way. They think they sent out 97,000 ballots or so to people where they weren't necessarily sure if the registration was accurate, if they were citizens or not. Minnesota breaking the same story just 3 days ago. There was a report coming out in Utah today, discrepancies between the number of mail-in ballots sent out to those received in primaries. So there's obviously a problem, but they never want to actually address the systemic issues. Instead, they just want to wheel out these weird old dusty politicians.
Here's Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney says the election's secure.
We like him now, okay?
But this to me, when I see all of this stuff, the corporate press, Dick Cheney, I'm sorry, it's an old, decayed system.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be as mean as I can about it. Sorry, old folks who watch the show. I mean, no disrespect, but it's kind of like watching Tony Hawk skate at 55 or whatever. and Tony's great. He's a great guy, and I don't mean to be mean to him, okay? But one of the most gut-wrenching videos is when you watch Tony Hawk land his last 900. Okay, this is a flying up in the air, spinning 2.5 times and coming down, and he was like 52. He struggles with it because he's getting old. He slams his helmet down and says, my son was here the first time. He's here the last time. That's it. I'll never do this again. And you're watching this legend of the sport walk away. You see, the difference is, we like Tony. Like, we like our athletes. So when they're retiring, it's like, man, sad to see him go. Imagine if Tony decided to say, I'm not going anywhere. I'm the best. You can't kick me out of these sporting events, and started showing up trying to skate against 9-year-olds who are doing 1080s. Okay, maybe a bit too much jargon. The point is, imagine some 57-year-old retired football player was like, I demand to go to the Super Bowl. And you're like, dude, you can't hang. Like, what are you doing? And then he comes in, pulls strings, gets people kicked off teams, tries to get the refs to favor him, to tell everybody how good he is. It's like, dude, we know you can't do this anymore. You could have left. You were the vice president 24 years ago, whatever. Congratulations. But these people coming out now and being like, look, we're all together in this. It's the Trump people that are bad. This is the younger generation, the internet generation, the populist generation saying, you guys have lost the power, sit down and shut up. But they won't go away. Let's put it this way, man. At least in sports, at a certain age, people retire, and they retire young. There's a lot of athletes, it's like, oh, the 35, that's it. I'm out. If they make it to 35, 35-year-old in skateboarding is ancient. The top skateboarders are like 15 to 20 years old. So if you're 35, it's like, wow, that's really impressive how old you are and you're able to do these tricks and compete at this level. It would be like watching a bunch of, like I mentioned, 50, 60-year-old football players pulling strings, using money to make sure younger guys couldn't get in. The refs are all the same age. That's what we see with Congress. That's what we see with the Senate. What do they call it? Octogenocracy or whatever.
But the illusion is that there's no physical fitness test. It's just a rich man's game. They're feeding off the backs of the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland, the Federal Reserve. They know people that are paying them, and they're using their faces and their trusts. There's these companies, these shell companies, like Dick Cheney's a face for an organization of finance, and they just wheel him in. He says some crap, and then they wheel him out, and then
this is a bit we need to do. If football was like politics, and then it's just like a bunch of 80-year-old players, and there's young guys being like, I'd really like to play this game, and they're just like, you're not allowed to play, and they're spending money to keep out anyone new.
Then at the end of it, it turns out they're actually all on the same team. And
Right. they all go to the same locker room, and they're all patting each other on the butt.
To build on Tim's athlete analogy, though, it's like we all, Tony Hawk was beloved. The media
Still is.
The media tried telling everyone how much they hate Dick Cheney for years and years and years. And now in their like desperate throes, they're wheeling this guy out to be like, no, we respect what this guy says because he hates the guy we hate now.
They called him Hitler. They said, so this is the funny thing. When George W. Bush was president, they would hold up signs with him with the Hitler mustache. But then SNL would make fun of him and say he's really stupid. And they would go, Dick Cheney's the real mastermind behind all of these. Like Halliburton, right? He's the guy. So he's actually the one running the show. Now they're like, I am honored to have the endorsement of Dick Cheney. Wow, it means a lot to me.
We need the guy who runs the show.
It's also too, if you pay attention to like the MSNBC interviews of all these people, it's the new sort of, I think, psyop, which I'm sure I'll use this word a bunch during the show, but that they're going for the sort of, Lincoln Project Republican type that vote by trying to say that it's okay to vote for Kamala in this one election. You're still a patriot. You can still be an American, right? That's the kind of demographic that they're going after. And frankly, I think the through line that you could run it to is why you saw the embrace of patriotism at the DNC, right? The American flags that you've literally never seen before in the DNC, talking about how they love America. You're like, wait, what? Is this the right event? And I think that's the vote that they're really trying to court, but they're going about doing it in this very emotionally driven, like it's sort of cultish, right? Like you can still vote for us.
Because it is a cult.
Yeah. It's almost like it is a cult. Yeah.
That's what they do. They struggle session you.
Cult. Yeah.
If you want to leave, and they subtly struggle session you if you're in it.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.